right, I think we are live. What's going on, folks? Welcome to the live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is sort of an emergency live stream for today, this afternoon. I am not going to be able to put out a video today, so I decided to call an audible and instead talk about the latest with today's outlook. Quite a bit to go over during this live stream, so if you know folks that are going to be impacted by today's severe weather, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, and share with family and friends who, like I said, will be impacted by some of this severe weather later on today. Also, I'm going to be live here, I want to say, for the next hour. Let me make sure I don't have any music on. I don't. Okay. I'm going to be on here for the next hour. And then I do have to dip around 12 Central. By the way, in case you guys didn't know, I am from the Chicagoland area. So I don't know if you could tell by the Midwest accent, or I don't know if I even told you guys that I'm from the Midwest, but I am from Chicago. I've grown up here for 27 years. And as I've said on a few of my videos now, I am currently in the process of moving to South Carolina. So we are kind of in a bunch right now, if you will, because that's why I'm not able to be frequent with my uploading schedules, because I'm also moving too. And that's also why I'm only going to be able to do a live stream with you guys here for about an hour or so. What I am also going to do is in the description and also in the comments, probably towards the end of the video, I'm going to link you to some streamers that I highly, highly recommend you watch, okay? I know it's very unconventional for somebody to send somebody else another way, but I really love what these weather YouTubers do. I'm talking about Ryan Hall, Evan Fryberger, MaxVelocity, so I'm going to link you to them. I think they're going to be wonderful resources for you throughout the afternoon and evening, and that's really when we're going to see a lot of the severe weather begin to fire up. But in the meantime, with this forecast discussion that we're doing here live on the channel, if you have any questions, post those down in the comments below. Also, if you're watching this video after we are live, so you're watching the kind of recorded part of this, you can also post your comments in the chat below, and I will still be sure to respond to each of your questions. So if you notice during this discussion that you are in the moderate risk of severe weather for later on today, and if you have questions about that maybe we didn't get to, or some clarification you need, again, post that down in the comments below. Without further ado, let's get into the latest, and this is very impromptu, but what I want this to be is a discussion driven for you guys, and any questions that you have, like I've said already. But also, we're going to go through the ingredients-based forecasting, why we're expecting to see what we're expecting to see later on this afternoon and evening for much of the Midwest. We'll start first here on the latest from the SPC. We have this moderate risk of severe weather that pretty much encompasses much of east central and central Iowa, extending all the way south in north central Missouri, and even getting as far east as western Illinois. So for you folks in Dubuque, Quad Cities, Burlington, Clinton, Iowa, all along the Mississippi River Valley there, you are also under that moderate risk. So I am not going to read through every single part of this because a lot of this is very technical, right? However, I am going to kind of go through this and see if we can't nitpick on a couple of things and then extrapolate that while we go through our discussion for today. So for one thing, they do mention right away an outbreak of severe thunderstorms, including the potential for strong tornadoes, is expected mainly this afternoon to early evening, with the greatest threat over Iowa and parts of adjacent states. So we're going to focus more in on the upper Mississippi to lower Missouri valleys. There are other areas of severe weather, such as the Northeast and parts of New England. We're not going to go into that for today because obviously the greatest risk of severe weather is going to be for the folks here in the Midwest. So it goes on to say, and by the way, this discussion was as of 8 a.m. this morning. We're also going to go over the latest conditions that we're seeing right now. I just saw as we went live that there is a mesoscale discussion that is out, so we'll also be sure to cover that too. An ongoing organized band of thunderstorms with a history of producing several measured severe gusts in central eastern Nebraska are going to sweep across much of Iowa through the remainder of the morning. The activity will overtake isolated strong to severe convection near the outflow boundary, where relatively maximized low-level vorticity and instability will be most strongly juxtaposed. That's a nice word. Very fancy, juxtaposed. Severe gusts, sporadic large hail, and a tornado or two all are possible, and it also redirects us to the current severe thunderstorm watch that is in effect as the time of this video for south central Iowa, essentially. It also goes on to say that the activity is a precursor to the main event, which is expected to sweep across much of the same areas through midday into the evening. Scattered to numerous thunderstorms, including multiple fast-moving supercells, are expected to form over parts of eastern Nebraska from midday into early afternoon, and over Iowa and northern central Missouri this afternoon as well. This will occur as the cold front impinges on a retreating outflow boundary from the morning storms, and an air mass destabilizing rapidly on both sides of the boundary from a combination of diurnal heating and intense warm advection. Sufficient air mass recovery from a surface-based all-hazard severe threat is expected across most of Iowa and probably into southern Minnesota as well. So what they're essentially referring to, guys, in case you're wondering, is we've had these ongoing thunderstorms across Iowa this morning. And in many cases, you might make the argument that that can actually stabilize the environment. However, if storms happen early on in the morning, there's still plenty of time for the environment and the atmosphere to recover. It's what we call diurnal heating. It's the idea that as our sun rises, our temperatures will increase. And as we know, when temperatures increase, instability also increases. So timing is critical here. A lot of the convection we've seen this morning is still in the process of clearing out of the area. And we actually have a lot of clearing going on in southwestern Iowa. And that's the exact area that we are expecting to see another round of showers and thunderstorms. And as the SBC alludes to, essentially the main event for the rest of this today. So it also goes on to mention here, where did I go? Here we go. Yes, spreading into parts of western northern Illinois and Wisconsin ahead of the main convective arc. Several tornadoes, some strong EF2 damage potential plus are possible, along with large damaging hail and severe downdrafts. Given potential for cell motions of 45 to 50 knots, so it's not talking about the wind speed, folks. It's talking about how fast the storms are moving. Potential exists for a few long-track mesocyclonic tornadoes. So what they are referring to when we're talking about mesocyclonic, I'm going to try my best to draw this, and my drawing, guys, is absolute crap, so bear with me. But it essentially is your classic supercell shape. Looks kind of like that little curlicue that we sometimes are synonymous with. Now, it's not going to look that perfect. We're not really expecting to see a lot of discrete supercells, but if we're looking for the mesolow, we would find it right within that curl, and that's exactly what they're referring to. So essentially, what is hinted at here is that these storms are going to be very, I would say, organized in a way. Again, they're not going to be discrete, but they're going to be organized in the way that they could potentially produce long-track tornadoes and damaging ones as well. So there's one more part to this, and I am going to skip over Ozarks and South Texas because I'm actually going to summarize a lot of that in the rest of the live stream today. But the approach to the shortwave trough, remember shortwave trough meaning that jet stream, and then our trough axis right here. That shortwave trough is going to increase large-scale lift, now evident with post-frontal convection over southwestern Nebraska and northwestern Kansas that may be trackable across southern Nebraska to the earliest substantial convection midday hours. I'm going to skip a lot of this here. Steep mid-low level lapse rates. We'll also have 2,000 to 3,000 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE. Should develop over much of Iowa. Slightly weaker, still favorable values clipping parts of southern Minnesota. Activity should begin to gradually outrun the corridor of favorable surface-based buoyancy in the evening after crossing the Mississippi River, but may remain well organized in terms of severe wind threat across Lake Michigan. The largest low-level photographs should be near and north of the remnant outflow boundary with effective SRH, storm relative helicity, by the way, exceeding 300 joules per kilogram. But will be favorable for potentially tornadic supercells farther south into southern Iowa and parts of Missouri. Okay, so there's a lot to dissect there, okay? And the whole point of this live stream is to be able to just disseminate that in a way that we can all understand it, especially for you folks up here in the Midwest. So let's break this kind of categorically here. So if we look at the tornado potential, we do have now a 15% SIG, and that's going to be mainly for Iowa. So for you folks in Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Ames, even extending further east into the Quad Cities, so Davenport, Moline, Rock Island, Burlington, Clinton, you guys along the Mississippi River Valley, and then on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River, folks in Sterling or pretty much anywhere along the far western reaches of the I-88 corridor and Interstate 80, that is going to be the greatest potential for not just tornadoes, but ones that could be significant as well. We also do have a 10% SIG that even extends as far east as the far western portions of the Chicago metro, as well as Milwaukee. So those two, of course, you guys have tornado potential as well. And then it, of course, decreases in probability the further east you go away from the Great Lakes. The wind potential, 45% SIG. This is really going to be, I would argue, the main event of today. Yes, we're going to have a high probability of tornadoes, and we have to take that seriously. But for a larger swath of population, in terms of the greatest hazard, it's going to likely be the damaging winds. So right now we have a 45% SIG across central and eastern Iowa once again. But you also notice, though, that we have a 30% SIG that extends into Chicago and Milwaukee. That wind threat is not going to be until tonight. So if we were to put a time frame on that, for you folks in the Chicago metro, Milwaukee, we're not going to be seeing a lot of that severe weather until likely 6 to 8 o'clock this evening. So there is still plenty of time for you to make any preparations. If you got to go out to the store, if you got to run some errands, you got to go to work from 9 to 5, you guys should be fine. What I'm particularly concerned about is if you are going to be traveling right around that 6 to 8 o'clock time frame, you want to make sure you try to avoid that at all costs, because it is going to be very dangerous to do so, especially along a lot of these interstates here in Chicago, 57, 55. We all know the interstates, guys, 90, 294, 290, the list goes on and on. I would try to avoid a lot of the expressways tonight because it's going to make for some pretty dangerous travel. Also, for you folks that are flying out tonight, if you're flying out of O'Hare, you want to check your flights. Check your flights, because I guarantee you there is likely going to be delays. Considering the fact that what we're going to see later on in this discussion, by the time the system moves through tonight, it's going to be, again, very strong, damaging straight line winds that we're talking about here. So you want to make sure if you have any flights, you're flying out of O'Hare tonight, you're flying out of Milwaukee, make sure to check the latest on your flight plans and be ready for delays if you're going to be flying out later on tonight. Finally, with the hail, though, we do also have the chance of that. However, most of the significant hail is likely going to be west of Des Moines. So you see that highlighted here with a 45% SIG, and that's going to be for Des Moines, but also extending west into Omaha, Lincoln, Nebraska, and far eastern portions of Nebraska, and that even goes as far south as Kansas City. So you folks in Kansas City and some of the surrounding suburbs, you also are going to see a pretty high probability of significant hail. Now, going back to the wind for a second, when we talk about SIG, you see this little hatched mark here, we're talking about not just a high probability of strong straight line winds, but destructive straight line winds, greater than, say 60, 70 knots at the surface. So we're talking about hurricane force winds. We could be seeing winds in some cases greater than even 80 miles per hour at times, if not higher than that. So you want to make sure that for those that are in the Hatch region, as we just talked about, central Iowa into the Chicago and Milwaukee metros, you want to make sure that you are weather aware and you're all prepared for when these storms do reach the area later on tonight. But back to the hail, this significant portion that you see here hatched is referring to not just the high probability of hail, but also hail that could be very, very large. We're talking about greater than 2 to 3 inches in diameter. It's especially going to be true in western Iowa because of the fact that a lot of those storms early on, as this cold front pushes east, are going to be semi-discrete supercells and are going to have really steep lapse rates aloft, very strong cooling with height. So that's essentially going to create a lot of instability and really strong, robust updrafts to support larger hail that falls down to the surface. So that is the current risk for today. What I want to start with now is going back here and looking at the mesoscale discussion which as of the time of this live stream, we now just got a new tornado watch. It was just issued in the last 12 minutes. So we'll go ahead and read through that here. I'm going to skip then on the mesoscale discussion. This is going to be in effect now for eastern Nebraska and far western reaches of Iowa. If you want to know the probabilities on that, probability of 2 or more tornadoes out of that watch is a 50% chance, and the probability of 1 or more strong tornadoes is 40%. That's pretty high for a tornado watch. So this is going to be in effect this morning and basically starting now until 5 p.m. Central. Few tornadoes, couple intense possible, scattered large hail likely, isolated very large hail events to 3 inches in diameter, and then scattered damaging wind gusts to 70 miles per hour likely. Okay, so if we're looking for the highest hail potential, it's going to be in this area that is highlighted in the tornado watch. So for you folks in Sioux City, in Spencer, Lincoln, Omaha, you guys need to be prepared for not just these essentially what will be semi-discrete supercells, but also storms that can produce giant hail that can definitely ruin your day and destroy your windshield. So if you're going to be traveling, if you want to know the timing on this, guys, like I said, the watch is going to go until 5 o'clock this evening. But really, I mean, the window of opportunity for the severe weather that we're going to see is going to be any time between, say, 1 o'clock and 4 p.m. for this area. So if you know folks that are in western Iowa, if you know folks that are in eastern Nebraska, you want to make sure to share this live stream with them and make them aware of what's going on, because these storms are going to move very fast. We already went through the SPC discussion, and they highlighted themselves 40 to 50 knot storm motion. That is very, very fast. If you want to translate that to miles per hour, these storms could be moving in upwards of 60 to 70 miles per hour. So if you are only 20 minutes away from a storm, or not even 20 minutes, say you're only 15 miles away, and it's moving at 70 miles an hour, that storm is going to be at your doorstep just like that. So for folks that are in this region, we're going to go over what's happening right now here in just a moment. But you want to make sure that within that time frame I highlighted here, 1 to 4 p.m., that you are making sure that you're taking your proper precautions and that you are staying tuned to the local weather. And again, it doesn't have to just be me. It could be your favorite weather YouTuber. It could be your NOAA Weather Radio, which I strongly recommend that everybody has. Or it could also be the local TV Met that you trust and love. Whatever your source of information might be, myself included, go with it and make sure you're tuned in, because these storms are going to be here and they're going to be gone, but they're also going to provide a lot in the way of some disruptive behavior later on this afternoon for you folks there. All right, so that is the tornado watch. I will go through it once more, but this time I want to go towards the bottom. And it just says here briefly, the atmosphere is expected to rapidly become favorable for severe storm development, including the potential for tornadoes through early to mid-afternoon. Pretty straightforward. I think it's that's the best thing you could say at this point. I don't think you need any more explanation than that. All right, so the other thing I want to go over with you guys here, let's take a look at the latest right now on RadarScope. And this is the cell that we need to be concerned about. Guys, if you're wondering where we should be turning our attention to right now, it's actually not towards central Iowa. Although we do have that cell that we're going to be talking about here in a moment. The main event for a larger, much broader population is going to be out here near KOAX. It's starting as we speak. So this is our first cell of the day that is essentially part of our quote-unquote main event. And that is right now out towards southeastern Nebraska. So let's take a look at that on the latest. So, severe thunderstorm warning in effect just to the northwest of Lincoln. And we do have a hail marker of 1.5 inches. Located 5 miles south of Waco, 7 miles southeast of York, moving northeast at 50 miles per hour. We got ping pong ball size hail. And this, of course, is radar indicated. Let's take a closer look at that here. It is moving off towards the east and northeast. So for you folks in Dwight, Garland, Seward, Staplehurst, and Ulysses, you want to make sure that you are taking your proper precautions right now, because that storm is going to continue to move off towards the north and east. If we're looking here at velocity, not really seeing much. I do see a bit of a signature here on tilt 1 of some, I would argue, weak rotation, but let me see if that even correlates to a hook. Nah, If there was to be some broader rotation, it's going to be in this corridor. But honestly, I wouldn't even call it that right now. I think that's very premature. What's very clear, however, if you can see this, you have a really nice signature of spiked DBZs. So that just means when we see pinks and purples on our radar, that's telling us really heavy precipitation. So if anybody's seeing the worst of the hail right now, it's going to be you folks in Utica as well as Waco, as we just got a new severe thunderstorm warning that popped up here. Let's take a look at that. That just popped up. Oh, okay. Huh. So we actually had an observed tag earlier of $half size hail, but that has now been upgraded to 1.5 inches. And that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So ping pong ball size hail is now on that is now tagged on that severe thunderstorm warning. Okay. So yeah, I don't see rotation right now, guys, to be honest with you. I can go up a couple tilts and see if that's the case. A couple of areas, but I wouldn't even call it that. And I don't even think these storms are tour possible, and I don't think they should be. No. Okay. Yeah, so just wind at the moment as of the time of this video here. So just damaging straight line winds and hail is the primary hazard for you folks in the severe thunderstorm warning. As I keep looking at each frame here, I mean, you can clearly see your DBZs are spiking. That's a bad sign. Certainly ruining somebody's day with some hail here. If we look at Ville real quick, yeah. Oh yeah, there's definitely hail falling out of that for sure. Okay, so that's that in terms of the severe thunderstorm warning over in Nebraska. Let's quickly take a look over in Des Moines on this guy. And it looks like we have another hailer, believe it or not. And, oops. Let's see. There we go. Let's get high def. Cool. All right, so we have another severe thunderstorm warning to the east of Des Moines. And this is a considerable tag. Golf ball size hail, 60 miles per hour, located over Pella Municipal Airport and moving northeast at 60. Guys, we talked about the storm motion today. This is going to be a common theme for the rest of the afternoon and evening. We're going to be seeing storms moving really quickly. And that's because we have really strong winds aloft. Those are going to force those storms north and east. And like I said, they're going to be here at your doorstep and they're going to be gone. I mean, that's how quick these storms are moving. So it's going to be near Pella Municipal Airport, as it already is, Grinnell Regional, Malcolm, Resnor, Oakland Acres, Guernsey, if I pronounce that correctly, Seasboro, Linville, Harvey, and Elk Rock State Park. It's going to be near you here in the next 20 to 30 minutes. So you want to make sure, just like for the folks in Nebraska, that you're taking your proper precautions as well. If we dissect this storm a little bit, not seeing rotation here. Much of this is just straight line winds that we're focused on at the moment. It's a pretty chonky cell, I gotta be honest with you, but not seeing any signature in the way of a meso low. I'm not seeing that classic hook right now, and that makes sense because we don't really have the tornado parameters yet to support it. We are going to here as we go through the afternoon and evening. That will increase over time, but as of right now, not so much. However, we still do have quite a bit of instability, otherwise we wouldn't have these cells firing off, and that's exactly what's happening right now. So that's moved through Pella, that's now moved through New Sharon, and if we go here on velocity, we already looked at that, pretty broad. Correlation coefficient also shouldn't show us much. Here's what it does show, though. You guys see this yellow and blue? Whenever you see on CC, I think a lot of times, like, people will always, this is a very common mistake. People will always mistake this signature right here on CC, and they're going to immediately say, oh my god, it's debris, it's debris. No, it's not. It's not debris. That, my friends, is what's called a scatter spike. So what's happening is, if we were to look at our radar, real quickly, let me explain this to you guys. If we were to look at our radar, let's pretend that arbitrarily, this is our radar. Okay, my radar sits over here, and it's represented by this stick figure, right? My radar behaves like a bat, and if you know anything about bats, they use echolocation. So they will send out a sound, and whatever sound is essentially heard back is how the bat's going to perceive where it's going to move to in a cave, okay? Radars work the exact same way. It's the idea of echolocation. So every minute, that radar beam is essentially being shot out, and it doesn't look exactly like that. It's going to be more so this oscillating wave. And as it does so, it's going to... Let me fix my pen. There we go. As it does that oscillating wave, right, it's going to then send back information to the radar. So what's happening here is we're seeing the radar in real time sending out a beam to the storm. It's going through it, it's cutting across it, and then all of a sudden it's hitting the hail core and going, oh shit, I don't know what that is. And so it's sending back information to the radar saying, okay, I'm seeing the storm, but I don't know what the hell is going on in this part of it. So what part that would be, you might be asking, is near that hail core. So if we go back here to CC, you notice that we have this sort of silver and black that's showing up. A lot of times people will look at that and they're going to say, oh man, that's debris. Brendan, it's debris. We got a tornado. We don't. That's not a tornado. That is hail that's being essentially interacting with the radar beam. That radar beam is hitting the hail head on, and then it deflects south. All right, so then it kind of hits, not south, it deflects downward, hits the ground, and is telling the radar, I can't see what's going on here. And it's just kind of giving you jarble. So that is a common mistake that I see, and it's a mistake that professionals make too, a lot of the times, including myself. We might see this and go, hey, that's a tornado. No, it's not. It's actually hail. How we know that too is because if we go back to reflectivity, hey, look, we have high DBZs near the core. And where did we see our correlation coefficient going funny? When our radar beam cut through the other side of it. So that's not debris. That is our radar beam that's interacting with the hail core, and it's going, oh, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know. And so we can then say, all right, there's got to be some really intense precipitation, whether it be heavy rain or hail. And in this case, it's very large hail. So they just updated the severe thunderstorm warning. Actually, yeah, just now, about 3 minutes ago. And we've actually upgraded it to a higher hail threshold. So this severe thunderstorm warning has been updated. It's located 6 miles south of Linville, 8 miles northeast of Pella, moving northeast at 60. Same speed, same storm motion. Hazard this time is tennis ball size hail and 60 miles per hour winds. Oh my goodness, you do not want to be in this storm. I want to remind folks, if you are in Malcolm, Brooklyn, Guernsey, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Deep River, Bam City, Montezuma, please take your precautions. Treat this like a tornado warning. Go to the lowest floor of a sturdy building, stay away from windows, and please, for the love of God, get off the road. If you are on the road right now, if you're on what would be essentially Interstate 80, and you're near Brooklyn and Victor, you're downstream of these really intense thunderstorms that are going to be moving to your northeast. And they're going to be looking, if you're looking from the interstate right now, they are off to your southwest. All right, so you want to make sure that you are taking your proper precautions, okay? Let me go ahead and minimize this. And let's see here. I was going to share the link, but you know what? That's okay. That's all right. I will do that next time. This is a very impromptu live stream. All right, so that's the latest on those severe thunderstorm warnings. Let's head quickly back over to eastern Nebraska. And yeah, we're clearly seeing what would be a crap ton of outflow. And if you're looking off here towards the south, you're actually seeing some pretty strong winds here to the south of that severe thunderstorm warning. So specifically for folks near Milford, Seward, Garland, and Malcolm, off to your west and southwest, we're beginning to see some outflow taking place. So if you're noticing that arc here, right, near Goner and Seward, that is actually strong straight line winds. We're seeing that happening right now as we speak. And if anything, on our velocity map, yeah, not much in the way of rotation now. There was a little bit, but I mean, it was very negligible. Nothing to really write home about. Now we see our RFD has become very outflow dominant in this storm. We're not really getting a lot of inflow right now into it. So this is probably, at least for the short term, for the next, say, half hour, I would suspect it's going to be mostly just a severe thunderstorm warning. But as that moves off to the north and east here, we certainly could expect to see, more of that tornado potential increasing as our low-level jet does so. Okay, so that's the latest on the severe thunderstorm warnings right now. Let's take a look at some of the meso-analysis here, our current OBS. All right, so I guess we'll head on over to COD. And let's go to the satellites and radar. So here's kind of where we're at. Let's put on a couple of overlays so you guys can see this. This might be kind of hard to see, so I am going to do a little bit of some drawing over it. So one thing that stands out, this is the latest as of right now. All these wind barbs that you see are the surface winds, okay? So we clearly have southerly flow that's feeding out ahead of this thing, all right? Our cold front is actually back towards, I guess you could say, like if this was our low pressure, our cold front is back this way, and then our warm front is going to be sort of shunted, but sort of within this region here. So let's redraw that to recap. So we have moisture advection coming up from the Gulf, southerly flow, clear as day. Temperatures have already warmed near the 90s in some parts of central Illinois. Warm front is going to be drawn here in pink, currently positioned over northern Illinois, and is technically a little bit into southern Wisconsin, but it's being shunted by a lot of that cloud cover and convection. We then have our cold front that's going to be out towards central Kansas, and our low pressure is centered near Lincoln and Omaha. So as our low pressure deepens, here's where I'm concerned. Oh, by the way, one other thing I want to mention, we also do have a southwesterly component. So it's, by definition, it's not technically a triple point by definition, but we still do have southwesterly flow feeding into this thing, right? So why we're concerned about Iowa is that as this low pressure moves off towards the north and east, it's going to continue to deepen. As it deepens, it's going to essentially induce what we call baroclinic instability, meaning that as our low pressure deepens, it's going to create even more instability within the region of the low pressure. So if that low pressure is moving off towards the northeast, it's based right now in eastern Nebraska, and that moves off to the northeast and the upper Midwest, then essentially what we're looking at here is a deepening low pressure system and the greatest tornado potential being in central Iowa today, and maybe even as far south as Quincy, and for those in Kirksville, Missouri. That's going to be for the early initiated convection, because we're going to have a lot of instability to work with there, baroclinically, meaning that we're going to have storms that are going to want to rotate. So that cell that we just looked at here in Lincoln, or near the Lincoln radar, just because it's outflow dominant now and the RFD is overtaking it, doesn't mean that it's not going to want to rotate later on. There's a tornado watch out for a reason. And that's because, as we've mentioned throughout this entire live stream here today, as we go forward into the afternoon and evening, the conditions are only just going to deteriorate further and are going to be even more conducive for tornadoes. We're not even at that point yet. As of right now, it's 11:45 in the morning. We're not even at that point yet. So you want to make sure that you're, being weather aware, taking your proper precautions, because central Iowa is definitely at play, and we're certainly seeing a lot of clearing going on down in eastern Kansas. Let me zoom in a little bit further for you guys just so we can see this clearer. So again, here's our low pressure. If we just kind of move this. Oh, I just sped that up. I hate when that happens. Hold on. How do I fix that? See, every time, there's a weird thing on COD where if you change the speed of the radar loop, it like starts bugging out. It really doesn't like that. I didn't even mean to do that. So let's do that. Oh, is it going to do it again? Why does it do that? That's so weird. That's fine. Well, let me see if I can... Hold on. Chat, let me... let me see if I can fix this, because that is pretty annoying. Let me try to see if I can fix that. By the way, if you have any questions, be sure to post those down in the comments and chat below, and I'd be happy to answer those. Let's go over to regional sector. Okay, perfect. That works. Wait, hold on. Good, that works. Okay, so as a reminder, if we were to put on our overlays, so station plots, courtesy of College of DuPage, you can see, so follow your easterly flow. We have easterly winds up towards, well, they pretty much extend into central and southern Wisconsin. I would actually argue that if our low pressure is going to be right here in eastern Nebraska, then our warm front is likely to be somewhere in this area. And let me actually redraw this. Let's do that. And let's go to red. So here's the warm front. And I'm placing it right near southern Wisconsin, just kind of a rough sketch. And then our cold front is going to be pretty much coinciding with the low. We have backed winds out towards central Kansas, so it's going to look something like that. And then you also have the southwesterly flow that we talked about. And that is, looks like near Kansas City, southwesterly towards southeastern Kansas and Oklahoma City. So it's roughly somewhere within here. Now, as I mentioned before, this is not by definition like a triple point setup because we don't have like a stout dry line we're advecting. It's mostly just dry air that's being advected broadly. So what I mean by that is typically you have a dry line that sloshes back and forth. And then sometimes if you have a really strong cold front, it's going to advect the dry line and shove it east. That's not what we have here. We just kind of have a little bit of dry air being advected. It's kind of sneaking in as opposed to like a really broad area of it. So it's not technically a triple point, but we still have that dry air component to factor in. That's going to help to destabilize the environment too, as we've already seen. And lead to some really steep lapse rates and large hail. We're also observing that right now in some of our earlier cells. So what we're seeing in Iowa and Nebraska at the moment truly is a precursor to what we're going to expect later on this afternoon and evening across the region. So that is the current setup right now. And as just kind of a refresher, as this low pressure moves off towards the north and east with time, that's when I expect to see the greatest severe weather potential to just shift east. For you folks in central southern Iowa, and then eventually for what would be northern Illinois, eastern Iowa. By the time we get to, and I'm going to roughly say the 6 to 8 o'clock p.m. time frame, be very careful about that. Sometimes these storms can move a lot quicker. Many times these fronts progress faster than model output. But I am going to stick to that time frame for now. It is very preliminary. So if you have, if you're watching this as it was recorded, or actually, I should say, if you were watching it after this was live, check the latest from the National Weather Service and also your local media outlets as well as the other weather YouTubers on YouTube for the latest information. Because trust me, there's going to be a crap ton of people live streaming today, from storm chasers to YouTubers. So there's going to be plenty of really great resources for you later on this afternoon. So 6 to 8 p.m. for you folks in northern and eastern Illinois on the greatest severe weather potential. And then southern and central Iowa, I'm going to kind of draw this a little bit here, a little bit messy, but it's okay. I'm going to say your severe weather potential really begins around 1 to 4 o'clock p.m. So early on in the afternoon. This is not going to be a nighttime event for you guys in southern and central Iowa. This is going to be beginning early on. And we already have that tornado watch issued for western Iowa and eastern Nebraska as we speak. So let's take a look at some of the models. And again, for those of you joining the live stream, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, post those down in the chat below. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm here for you guys. So go ahead and post those if you have any questions regarding today's event, and I will get to each and every one, I promise you. But let's quickly, with the time that we have, we're going to go over the models that we have at the moment, the latest updates from some of those models, and then we are going to go to the latest on some of the active severe weather warnings that we have right now. So let's take a look here at the Rufus, as I like to call it, and this is the 12Z. A lot of this is going to coincide with the timing that we've already outlined, all right? But let's zoom in a little bit closer. Let's get into the Midwest. And so this is as of 12Z. This was earlier on this morning, but I would argue it's still relevant. It showed showers and thunderstorms moving through central and eastern Iowa. We're observing that right now. A lot of that has cleared out. We're mostly just cellular at this point. But by the time we get to this afternoon, it shows initial development out towards eastern Nebraska. We're also seeing that right now, so timing here is pretty much spot on. As a matter of fact, the only thing I would say is that the model output that we're looking at here from 12Z is actually running a little bit further behind, because 18Z would imply 1 o'clock. We already are seeing cells firing off near Lincoln, and it's only 11:45, close to 11:50. So when I said before that these systems tend to progress faster than the model output, here's a wonderful example of that. We're seeing that here in real time. But if we still take this model at face value, as we go forward, those cells that fire off across the Missouri River Valley near Sioux City, those are going to move off towards the northeast. And as they do so, look at that, guys. That just essentially blows up in your face. We have semi-discrete supercells that fire. I mean, count the helicity swaths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even a 6th cell out towards the eastern portions of Kansas City. By the time we get to 21Z, that's going to take us into around that 3, 4 o'clock time frame. And then if we take that a bit further throughout the day today and into the evening, we essentially go from semi-discrete soups to more of this arcing line. And this arcing line, remember, we just talked about it, it's that low pressure that would be now in southern Minnesota by the time you get to this evening. Here's that warm front, and then here's your cold front. All of these cells within that cold frontal boundary are all essentially merged together, and they're forming essentially one big line of frontal convection. I mean, look at the coverage area, guys. We're talking about maybe 300-400 miles of severe weather from eastern Iowa or east central Iowa, even extending as far south as Joplin today. Now, I did see some folks, I want to just add one thing to this. There are a couple supercells that fire as far south as Oklahoma. If you are looking for the most photogenic tornado today, that is the place to chase. For those of you that watch a lot of weather YouTubers, Connor Croft is a phenomenal storm chaser, excellent resource too. He actually made a post today saying that he was going to be targeting southwestern Missouri. There is a reason for that. And it's because there's going to be a lot more discrete supercellular activity at the tail of that cold front as opposed to further north when you have all these different cells that are merging with each other. So I actually agree 100%. I mean, if I was thinking to myself, if I'm going to chase today, if I even had the time to chase, what would I do? Where would I chase? It would probably be southwestern Missouri. I don't see why not. Because the issue is, if you're wondering about like chasing out in the Midwest, the big no-go zone is right here circled in black. That is the Mississippi River Valley. That is the absolute jungle, the worst place to chase in Illinois, aside from Carbondale and Shawnee National Forest. I mean, just terrible coverage area. My biggest concern, not to diatribe too much from our discussion, my biggest concern is that we're going to have a lot of chaser convergence near the moderate. And look where that is. I mean, we're talking about Quincy, Burlington, Clinton, Iowa. These are areas that are not chaser friendly, but you're going to have a lot of chasers that aren't familiar with the topography out here that get caught. So for folks that are going to be traveling in that area, I strongly advise they don't. I've had a couple of people come up to me, not physically, but actually reached out to me through Discord. And they were asking me, you know, hey, Brendan, I'm going to be chasing here in essentially the area circled. What do you think? And I told them absolutely not. If you're going to chase anywhere that doesn't require you to go all the way down to southwestern Missouri, your best place to chase is going to be east central Iowa. Period. As a matter of fact, you may even have to go further west than that. I would even argue west central Iowa, just west of Des Moines and Ames. Because at that point in time, you're going to have more of that semi-discrete supercell activity, and by the time this all goes frontal, I mean, it's just going to turn into a mess. And it's going to be quite difficult to chase because that is all one big arcing line of storms that are likely going to be moving anywhere upwards of 60 to 70 miles per hour plus. That's a pain in the ass to chase. And quite frankly, at that point, by the time it reaches the Chicago Metro by later on tonight, this is mostly just going to be one big windbag. A lot of cold pooling going on, cold air rushing forward behind the cold front. That's now matured at this point. By the time we get to around 8, 9 p.m., that's all just going to be straight line winds. So for folks in Chicago, and for you guys as well in Milwaukee, I mentioned this before, I'll say it again. Time frame on these storms, as of right now, plus or minus an hour or two, is still going to be around that 6 to 8 o'clock p.m. time frame. I did say that the models are like an hour and a half behind here. So it may be slightly earlier than the 6 to 8 p.m. time frame, but that's the general ballpark of when we're expecting these storms to move through. That is also why, if you're wondering about tornado potential in Chicago tonight and Milwaukee, tornado potential is likely going to be much lower than what we see out here towards Iowa. It's not because of the fact that our shear is going to be bad. It's not because of the fact that the tornado parameters are going to suck. It's going to be because of the storm mode itself. By this point, I mean, you see it here perfectly depicted by the rapid refresh that you are just going to have one big arcing line of storms. You are going to be so outflow dominant at that point, it's going to be quite challenging to get tornadoes out of that. Is there still the possibility of brief spin-ups later on tonight for folks in Milwaukee and Chicago? Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that happen before in a lot of these wind events. It's not out of the question. But if we're trying to forecast for significant tornadoes, the highest probability of long track damaging tornadoes, that's more than likely going to be out west near Iowa, where the parameter space is going to be much more conducive for storm mode that will support it, as well as an environment that's going to support it as well. So that is the rapid refresh rendition of it of 12Z. Let's take a look at the HER, though. I'm really curious to see what the latest on that is. And I gotta be honest, it's not resolving this convection very well at all. We do currently have a cell out towards east central Iowa. That's still going. So it's resolving that. But if we notice here in Nebraska, I mean, yeah, it's showing some convection, but guys, the models really aren't doing a good job at resolving this convection right now. And to me, that's not good, because what that tells me is there actually still is uncertainty with timing on things, as I kind of already alluded to. That's concerning as a forecaster. And that's one thing that I want to stress to you folks watching here today. If you are somebody that uses weather models, one of the other mistakes that I see all the time, and I've made this mistake too, okay, when I went to school for meteorology. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they go, all right, well, here's the HER, here's what happens over time, and okay, yeah, this model looks good, I like it. Before you even look at the model, before you even look ahead to what's going on, you need to see if this model output matches up with what's happening in real time. For one, we have the latest model run. Actually, no, we don't. Got to check for that, but that's still rendering. We have the latest model run, 15Z. Check. Good job. But then the other thing is, all right, does this make sense? Like, does this make sense? Are we seeing what the model output is showing us taking place in real time? We just kind of did that. We see that there is a severe thunderstorm warning near I-80. KOAX is showing severe thunderstorm warnings to the south and west of the radar site. Is that really happening? Yes, but this is off by a little bit. So immediately what this is telling me, from what we've just seen from the rapid refresh model and the HRRR, we are seeing these storms progressing faster than the model output can kick out. I can't say that I'm that surprised by what we're observing right now, because if these storms are moving at 60 to 70 miles per hour in terms of their storm motion, and our models refresh every hour, well, these storms can increase or decrease their speed. So any little change in the motion of these storms is going to greatly impact what the model output provides, because it's going to be feeding off a lot of that raw data. So that's exactly what's happening right now. When I mentioned that 6 to 8 p.m. time frame for Chicago, for example, that's why I said it could be a little bit earlier, because these storms are moving pretty damn fast. So here's where we're at, though. Shows convection out towards east central Iowa, and then also convection out towards south central Nebraska. If we go forward in time here, right? We see those storms that are near Lincoln and Omaha as we speak, and we'll go to those here in just a second. Those storms are going to increase in coverage throughout the day today, especially over the next couple of hours. Hence why we have that tornado watch. And then going beyond that point, that's when we start to see a transition, a gradual transition in the evening from sort of these semi-discrete supercells to more of a broader line of clustered convection with embedded supercells within the line itself. And then going forward in time, those storms do eventually die out by the time they get to Chicago. I personally don't like the HRRR's rendition here. I disagree. The HRRR is saying that Milwaukee and Chicago is just going to get a whole bunch of nothing. I don't think that that's going to be the case, considering the fact that things are progressing quicker. The quicker these storms initiate, the higher the probability is of severe weather downstream of this line. So I know that the HRRR is showing that. I don't buy it. I don't agree with it. I think that if we get this broader line that's gusting out a big cold pool, I mean, that straight line wind event and the individual Boeing segments that come with it would certainly last into the overnight for a large swath of these bigger population areas, Milwaukee, Chicago, even back towards northwest Indiana. So that's where we're at right now. I mean, overall, though, we have really good CAM agreement here. Like, I mean, the HRRR, except for Chicago, Milwaukee, HRRR and the Rufus are definitely in agreement there. Let's check the ARW and see. That's so weird. It wants it dying off too. And I don't buy that, guys. I really don't. I really don't. Let's take a look at... I guess we can look at our SIN. I mean, the only thing that I could think of is if it gets really stinking capped. And the cap erodes too. That's so weird. Even if there was a cap in the mix layer, that thing erodes on the ARW by the time we get to later on tonight. So yeah, I don't buy that, guys. I think I've said that enough. I don't buy that for a second. And if I'm wrong, hey, I'm a meteorologist. What can I say? You know, sometimes we're wrong. But I'm pretty confident that the severe risk for later on tonight is certainly warranted. Yeah, I mean, still, there's plenty of strong winds and veering with height. I don't see why not. So, I don't know. Call me a denier. Call me whatever you want. But I think that Chicago, Milwaukee is still in the higher props. All right, let's take a look here at our latest on some of these severe thunderstorm warnings that's ongoing. We were talking about these at the top of the live stream. Let's head on first down towards Des Moines. And we currently have a severe thunderstorm warning that is going to be heading towards Cedar Rapids, but is now in effect for folks in Marengo and Williamsburg. We do have a severe thunderstorm warning active for Montezuma, moving northeast at, 55 miles per hour. Pretty darn fast for today. 60 mile per hour, 60 mile per hour winds and quarter-size hail, radar indicated. This storm has had a history of producing some really large hail. It looks like here on our reflectivity, we've seen a bit of a downtrend on that, as what has also been acknowledged here on the warning itself. But this storm is going to be near Victor and Victor around 11:55, Ladora, Lake Iowa Park, and Genoa Bluff around 12, and then for you folks in Iowa County, Conroy, Williamsburg, and Marengo around 12:10 p.m. this afternoon. So here in the next 5 to 10 minutes for you folks downstream. And then for anybody here on the Interstate 80, it's going to be mile markers 205 and 228 for you guys as well. Even though we're seeing a weakening of this storm as far as the hail is concerned, we still are dealing with 60 mile per hour gusts, and we have plenty of instability to work with here. We're taking a look at velocity. I'm not seeing a whole lot as far as rotation's concerned. I know we don't even have a tour possible tag on this thing, but yeah, very little in the way of rotation. And I'll be honest with you too, we're not really seeing much in the way of strong winds. There's a little bit of corridor near Montezuma, but otherwise the most winds we're going to get out of this thing as it stands right now is going to be 60 mile an hour gusts. And then of course that quarter-size hail. So that's going to continue to move off here towards the northeast, 55 miles per hour. Cedar Rapids, you guys cannot catch a break for the life of you. I mean, pick a severe weather event you've dealt with over the last 5 years, and I guarantee you've dealt with more severe weather in 5 years than you have in the last 20 or 30. So you are not under a severe thunderstorm warning yet, but this cell is going to be moving towards you, and that's going to be, I would argue, the appetizer for today. The entree, or the main event that the SPC has been alluding to, is not going to be arriving here until likely the evening or afternoon hours, around 3 to 4 o'clock. So that's severe thunderstorm warning number 1. We then head on back to Omaha, Nebraska for our secondary severe thunderstorm warning. We've been keeping a really close eye on this because this area of convection, as we've seen here on the models, that is going to be the area of concern for the next round of severe weather development. We're already seeing a lot of upscale growth within these storms, but here's the latest on the warning. If we take a look at that real quick here, and by the way, there is certainly some form of residual outflow boundary, as noted right here on the radar site. So something that I just picked up on. There's not just a cell here and a line of thunderstorms, but we also have an outflow boundary that's just kind of chilling there. We'll see how that aids in the development of this storm. I would argue that we're going to see this thing really begin to ramp up as it intersects that boundary. So here's the latest on it. Winds are 50 miles per hour. However, the biggest source here is going to be the hail. So the severe weather hazard, golf ball size hail. The storm is located 5 miles northwest of Valparaiso, 14 miles southeast of David City, moving northeast at 55 miles per hour. And that's going to be near Colon around 12:15 and Cedar Bluffs around 12:20. And I believe I mentioned this already, but it is moving northeast at 55 miles per hour. If we take a look here at the velocity on these storms, you can not really see it because we're getting some radar interference, but I'd be willing to bet you there are some straight line winds that exist here, just not as strong. I'm not really seeing a really bright indication there. Let's take a look at storm relative velocity. Actually, that's a lot better. If it is, it's going to be right in that corridor of Malmo and Colon. But otherwise, those winds really aren't meeting severe weather thresholds. Why it's being warned is for the hail, and that currently is golf ball size. Let's look at that here on reflectivity and see if we can't spot that. Let's go to correlation coefficient. Not so much on CC. We can also use a product called VIL that helps us to integrate it. And yeah, I mean, that is pretty high. So we're definitely seeing heavier precipitation for you folks near Valparaiso. You guys likely just saw some pretty large hail move through. I'm not too sure if this golf ball size hail is going to last for much longer. It looks like this storm is doing a lot of consolidating right now, which tells me as a forecaster that we're going to be seeing a bit of a transition here. These storms are still going to be producing severe weather, but in terms of the storm's life cycle, it's likely that we're seeing hail at the moment that is going to decrease in terms of, sort of threshold as we move northeast. But as it moves northeast over time, we should expect the hail, wind, and tornado potential to just further increase as that low begins to deepen. So that is the latest on a lot of our storms right now. I'm going to head over to the SPC. I don't know if let's see if they have any mesos out yet. They did for that tornado watch. I guess I'll go over the tornado watch one more time. And then I think what we'll do is we'll look at the meso analysis and show you guys some of the current conditions here. Okay, so here is, they updated the day 1. And I don't think there is any change. But we will read through this here in a second. Let me see if there's any change here. 15 sig Tor, that looks the same. 45 sig, still the same. This looks, if there was a change, it was likely more of a southward extent on the wind potential. Or I should say the hail, or all three. But for the most part, as far as the main threat area, it's still pretty much the same. There hasn't really been much change here. But let's take a look at the discussion itself. Let's fix that. There we go. So I'm not going to read through the Northeast unless y'all want me to. I don't know why I said y'all. I'm not even from the South. I got to stop doing that. But it does say an outbreak of severe thunderstorms, including the potential for strong tornadoes, large hail, widespread damaging winds is expected this afternoon through evening, especially across eastern Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri to northern Illinois, southeast Minnesota, southern Wisconsin. I'm going to try not to read through all of this. There's a lot here to dissect, and I don't want to, talk your ear off for those of you that are watching the live stream. But I'm going to go through at least some of it. So mid-late this morning has had a history of producing at least isolated, episodic, severe weather since the pre-dawn hours. Those are basically the Iowa and Nebraska storms we've been talking about. Storms are focused along north of an outflow reinforced warm front that will lift northward through late today into tonight. Also what we talked about. This will be heavily influenced by a highly dynamic mass response to a northeast moving mid-level shortwave trough that is readily evident in water vapor imagery over the central high plains this morning. We also saw that too, by the way, on visible cloud cover, or visible sat. That said, some short-term uncertainties exist as of 15Z ob data, with gusty post-convective northeasterly winds still present across south-central Iowa, which relates to some uncertainty with the northward extent of the higher magnitude severe risk across Minnesota, Wisconsin later today. Although latest 16Z data features a recent ambient of those northerly winds, or abatement, of those northerly winds. Regardless, intense storm development is anticipated into the afternoon across a broad north-south corridor. Synoptically evident and regional outbreak favorable setup exists, especially by mid-late May standards, highlighted by a coupled upper jet structure over the upper Midwest, strengthening deep layer wind fields, and steady cyclogenesis from the Nebraska-Kansas border vicinity, this moving northeastward towards the Minnesota-Wisconsin border tonight. Low-level winds will remain strong diurnally ahead of the primary cyclone, but a noteworthy strengthening of mid-level winds 3 to 7 kilometers above ground level will rapidly occur through the afternoon and evening, which will likely have direct outbreak-relevant influences on initial supercell intensity. QLCS evolution and overall fast east-northeastward storm worsens later today. It then goes on to talk about steep mid-level lapse rates, dew points in the mid to upper 60s in the surface, mixed layer CAPE 2,500 to 3,000, and then also just kind of going along to saying fast-moving supercells. Initially semi-discrete supercell development is also plausible, and that's going to be for much of Iowa this afternoon in vicinity of modifying outflow warm front. I appreciate you guys coming to my TED Talk on that, by the way. I had a couple little trip-ups there in reading some of these words. Several tornadoes, including some strong with EF2 plus potential, are expected, along with large, damaging hail and severe downdrafts. This includes the possibility of long-track supercell tornadoes and swaths of locally intense wind damage. So we are still forecasting for a significant severe weather event across the Midwest and the lower Great Lakes. That has not changed. Timing, I would argue, has changed just slightly, but that's about it. We still have a really good parameter space conducive for severe weather. So as a reminder, for those of you watching, that way when we do go live, you will be notified too. So the other thing I wanted to mention to you guys is let's go over the meso-analysis. This is our latest obs. And if you have any questions about the severe weather threat for today, post those down in the comments below. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm happy to answer those for you. Even if you're not in the moderate and you're in a marginal and you want to know what the hell's going on for today, post down in the comments below. I'll be happy to give you a personal forecast for you. So as they talked about, here's our current low pressure. It's right near Nebraska and Iowa. We actually diagnosed this pretty well, guys. Chat, we did pretty good. That was awesome. So low pressure, as we talked about, right here in southeastern Nebraska, southwestern Iowa. Warm front is likely going to be placed somewhere within that corridor, and our cold front's going to be off the page. We have southerly flow that's being advected across Illinois this afternoon, and that even extends further west into parts of northern Missouri and southeastern Iowa. So, as we move forward here, once again, we've looked at models already, but if we look here at the wrap, you see that we have initiation taking place later on this afternoon, and that continues into the evening as it crosses the Mississippi River by the time we get to the 4 to 6 o'clock p.m. time frame. Latest conditions right now, let's start first with bulk shear. We're talking about 60 plus knots within this broad corridor here of Iowa and Nebraska. If we're trying to forecast for supercell development, this is only just one kind of piece to the puzzle. But if you have really strong bulk shear, that's a phenomenal sign, because that means that our shear, or our shear magnitude, the magnitude of the winds turning with height, is very strong. And usually around 60 knots, 50 to 60 knots is pretty much the sweet spot if we're trying to look for supercell development. And we have it. That's pretty clear as day. If we break this down, though, by level, and we look here at, say, surface to 1, we have 25 to 30 knots present in Iowa and Wisconsin, especially near the warm front, and then a little bit weaker as we get towards what would be eastern Nebraska. These shear values, though, even though we're only looking at about 15 to 20 knots, don't let that fool you, because the theme of today's video has been what? Things are going to get worse with time. So even though we're seeing 15 to 20 knots now at surface to 1, that's just going to get worse over the next few to several hours. Okay. So surface to 1, 25, 30 knots east of Nebraska and Iowa, especially if we get into Wisconsin, get some of that stronger shear. If we look at the surface to 3, really strong. Oh my goodness, 45 to 50 knots in that same corridor, highlighted by the surface to 1 being 25 to 30. Some weaker shear out towards eastern Nebraska, and I gotta be careful because I say weaker, but it's really not. I mean, we're still talking about 30 plus knots of 1 to 3 kilometer shear out towards this part of eastern Nebraska. That's really damn good. So the fact that I'm saying that that's weaker in comparison to the rest of the environment really says a lot about the environment. Let's see here. Let's look at also, I like to look at this too, and honestly, I don't know why a lot of people don't do this, but I like looking at storm relative wind because I want to know what the storm is feeling. So if I'm a thunderstorm and I'm anywhere in this little corridor as demarcated by the X's, well, I got really strong easterly flow feeding into it from surface level to like 2 kilometers. So I'm seeing easterly flow right now. Again, all the products we're looking at right now, this is right now in real time. This is not a model. This is real-time data. We have really nice storm relative wind from 0 to 2. What that tells me as a forecaster, we have really strong shear. My storm is feeling really nice storm relative wind that's essentially going to feed into the mesolow. And when I see really nice easterly wind like that, that immediately tells me that this is an environment very much conducive, not just for tornadoes, but long track tornadoes as well. There's a perfect reason why we have a 15% SIGTOR for central and eastern Iowa today. That is exactly why. The parameter space on the kinematics of it all, I mean, tells the whole tale, folks. It looks really nasty to me. That's sickening, for lack of a better term. Let's now look at a couple more products. We'll look here at our cape, and I'm going to look at mixed layer cape because I think we're somewhat elevated. And I will say, for one, we are still capped right now across Iowa, and we're uncapped across northern and central Illinois. Expect that cap to erode with time as we get more of that diurnal heating and clearing to take place, and we actually see that well represented here by the wrap. So as that cap erodes, which is that warm layer aloft, as that cap erodes and gets mixed out with increased heating throughout the day, our thunderstorm coverage as these storms move across central Iowa is only going to increase. So we don't have any watches out for you now in central and eastern Iowa, but be ready for them. They eventually are going to show up at this point. It will be just later on in the day. Let's see here. So that's the shear, or excuse me, that was the cape. Right now we got quite a bit of instability. We got this cap inversion that's sitting across Iowa. And yeah, just quite a bit of cape at the moment, about 1,000 to even 2,000 joules per kilogram. And then also, last thing, let's look here at our lapse rates. Not great right now, but in the mid-levels, they are looking even better. Instability, great theme, is just going to increase throughout the afternoon and evening, as evident by our shear values, as evident by the cape. And lastly, let's look at the photographs for right now. Look at that, folks. That's unbelievable. We have phenomenal veering and very elongated photographs. What that tells me is that not only is there a really nice tornado potential, but there also is a strong damaging wind potential too because of how long our photographs are. These lines, by the way, are representing winds with height. So we're talking about really strong winds here, both in the low and upper levels. So all hazards are certainly possible for deep convection and ones that will be able to produce large hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. Greatest tornado threat, as I mentioned before, is going to be within that 15 sig for folks in central Iowa. We're not seeing much initiation right now just yet. As we just mentioned, there's a cap inversion in place. That's got to erode and get mixed out first, but once it does, we're going to see a lot more of an increase in convection for later on today. Before we end the stream, let's take one last look at some of those storms that are active across Iowa and Nebraska. We have a new severe thunderstorm warning that's in effect just to the northwest of Omaha. And as I suspected, these storms weakened for a brief period, but are now increasing as indicated by our DBZs. And look at that. Look at that hail marker, guys. 2-inch hail, 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts, severe thunderstorm located near Malmo, 6 miles northwest of Wahoo, moving northeast at 55 miles per hour. Woohoo! It's like Mario. Love that name. It's a good name. Cedar Bluffs, Colon, around 12:20. Fremont, Englewood, and Woodcliff, around 12:25. Arlington and Nickerson, around 12:35. Herman, around 12:50. So that's going to be near quite a few camping sites, too. Summit Lake State Recreation Area, Camp Cedars, DeSoto Bend, National Wildlife Refuge, Winslow, Fontenelle, Ames, Lake Wanahoo Recreation Area, Fremont Lakes State Recreation Area. So if you're camping right now and you're out in your little tent, you want to know that these storms are moving off to your north and east, and they have had a history of producing very large hail and are now doing it again. 2-inch size hail markers on this individual cell just to the north of Wahoo, and that's going to be moving off towards the east and northeast, eventually for you folks in Arlington, Kennard, Nickerson, Fremont, and Englewood. These storms are also moving very fast, so take your precautions now. And if we take a look here at the latest on our hail marker, we can certainly see hail. You see that little 3-body scatter spike that's showing up here on CC. That's telling us not debris from a tornado, but large hail. So there's definitely hail falling from this storm that can certainly ruin your day. So make sure that you get to shelter, get to the lowest floor of a sturdy building. If you're out camping, just get to a building and stay away from as many windows as possible. You don't want to be out in this thing whatsoever. So that's the latest on that severe thunderstorm warning. The other one that we had as it making its way towards Cedar Rapids is still active, still churning, and is now moving into near the Quad Cities radar site. So let's take a look here at the latest on reflectivity. And we see now we do have that severe thunderstorm warning continuing, and that's going to be for 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts and quarter-size hail. I've been mentioning you guys in Cedar Rapids. It's moving ever so closely to you. You're going to be in this thunderstorm here within the next half an hour to an hour. So you want to make sure that even though you're not under a severe thunderstorm warning right now, that you are taking your proper precautions and making sure that you get to the lowest floor of a sturdy building, get away from windows and away from trees as well, if at all possible. If you are also driving out today along the interstates heading into Cedar Rapids, you want to make sure that you get to a shelter as soon as you can here because these storms are going to be moving through your area here in just a little bit. That is going to conclude today's Severe Weather Discussion live stream. I'm going to be sure to link a couple of references to folks that are going to be streaming later on today that I highly recommend that you guys watch for your severe weather coverage. They do a phenomenal job, and I think they're going to serve everyone very well going into this afternoon and the evening. I also forgot to mention that I will be joining a live stream myself. I'm going to be bouncing around a couple of different live streams. I will be doing some forecast analysis for David Schlotthauer on his channel, which I will go ahead and link as well. And I also will be heading over to Pat's Path Predictors YouTube channel and doing some weather analysis over there too for the afternoon and evening. So thank you all so much for tuning in. All the resources will be posted down in the comments below, and we will see you on the next weather video. Stay safe. Be sure to share this with those that will be impacted, and we'll see you soon. Take care.